Beautiful. It's easy to describe something as being cinematic. I mean, you could just say, this looks like it belongs in a movie, and then boom, technically it's cinematic. There's a lot of games that could fall under that definition, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a game that is made like a movie, that allows you to take control of the main character. A game that breaks the traditional storytelling molds and brings a completely new experience to the table. Let's talk about Control.
Before we begin, as always, if you like what you see, be sure to subscribe for more videos like this one. If you want to hang out with me live, I stream 3 times a week over at twitch.tv/Triceratops_Jr. Now let's get into it. Control was released by Remedy Games in August of 2019. It follows the story of Jesse Faden, who is called to the Oldest House, which is a massive ever-changing building, and home to the Federal Bureau of Control, a government agency dedicated to the classification and housing of paranormal entities. Jesse is aided by a mysterious presence called Polaris, who helps to lead her on the right path and protect her from an evil force called the Hiss, as she searches for her missing brother Dylan. Remedy Games has become known for cinematic storytelling. Their massive hit, Alan Wake, was described by Remedy as the mind of a psychological thriller and the body of a cinematic action game put together, which is actually the first time that I had heard the term cinematic action game, and what has really captivated me about their games. Which brings me back to what I talked about in my intro. What exactly makes a game cinematic? I choose to define it like this. A game that uses Hollywood storytelling techniques to create a compelling video game world, reinforced with gameplay and a semi-linear plot to push the player along. I define it like this for a few reasons. A lot of games can use Hollywood techniques in their writing, it happens all the time, but that alone doesn't make it cinematic. The game also needs to feel like you are playing a movie. Like, if you were to watch a scene in the game portrayed by actors, it would be just as riveting as when you're playing it. So for example, I wouldn't consider an open world game like Skyrim or Breath of the Wild to be cinematic. They have cinematic qualities, sure, but the games are far too open to allow for their storytelling to show through. Back to Control though, the game is pushed along by a main story. There are side quests, sure, but even a movie can meander a little bit as long as it makes its way back to the main plot. Think of side quests like scenes that are cut from a movie, only to be added later in an extended cut. Now that I have that definition out of the way, let's talk a bit more about Control itself. Control, at its most basic, plays like your average third-person shooter. Over-the-shoulder view with a zoom function. But what really makes Control shine is the addition of the powers. Things like a dash, a shield, telekinesis, mind control. I'm not exaggerating when I say that Control has the best feeling gameplay of any game, ever. When you grab something with telekinesis, it feels like you are grabbing it. When you dash or shield or really any combination of things, it just feels so smooth. The combat feels so natural and fluent that it almost makes you forget that you're playing a game. I think the standout among the pack has got to be the telekinesis. So many Star Wars games have tried to implement the Force in the past. Jedi Fallen Order got close, but I don't think any of them match up with how good it feels to use telekinesis in Control. It's just that good. And a big part of that comes down to the visuals of the game. Control has received critical acclaim for how good it looks. The first time I played Control was on a PS4. I was unable to change the settings on it, and since it was an older console, it actually lagged a bit. So when I picked up the game on PC, I was absolutely blown away. Playing Control on DirectX 12 with ray tracing is an insane experience. Every single thing looks so crisp and perfect. The game's graphics perfectly complement the trippy visuals. They can also be seen in cutscenes when you get a close-up on a face. The detail is incredible, especially when you look at the actors playing the character as well. Speaking about characters, let's talk about them. There's a wide cast of characters in Control. Some of them you meet, others are just read about in letters, but something that Control does brilliantly is that even with characters you don't ever meet, you can trace their stories through the game. One of my favorite examples of this is a series of notes found throughout the oldest house. The first is a work correspondence titled Teeth, which reads, "Guess who just had to inspect an inbound delivery of like 100 teensy tiny little boxes? Me, that's who." And you know what was in each one? A single human tooth. Fucking gross. A seemingly innocuous message at first, but a little bit later you find another correspondence titled Dead Dog, which reads, "I see your creepy teeth delivery and raise you a dead dog." Yeah, like a straight up deceased dog. Had a collar on it and everything. It had been rotting in that box since they packed it up. Go ahead and imagine how that smelled. So don't go whining to me. I wish I got to watch a parade of human teeth. The plot thickens. And then a little bit later, you find a final correspondence titled Plane Parts, which reads, "Okay, Mr. Dead Dog, what do you think of this? You know that airplane we brought in? Like the actual proper airplane? Guess who they made catalog every individual piece of that plane to be examined for suspected altered status? I had to count every bolt, nut, and piece of non-connected metal. And that's just on the exterior of the damn thing. Do you know how many pieces of hardware it takes to make an airplane? I do. I do. You don't know who these characters are. You don't know their names, their jobs, anything about them. But through these notes alone, you learn so much. The notes are completely inconsequential to the plot of the game, but the fact that they are there, the fact that they connect the way they do, and they add new character to the world. So even outside of our protagonist, Jesse Faden, there is so much going on in this place. I'm sure that I could make a video talking about every character in this game, because they'll all have their own plot. I'm not going to do that though, that would be too much work. The point is, taking the time to interact with the world reveals so much new info about the characters you meet, and the ones you never will. And the time and dedication put into that is worth the price of the game. Now, I was talking about what makes a game cinematic, and a large portion of that is about the story. So, let me talk about it. And just a warning, there will potentially be spoilers ahead, so if you don't want to be spoiled, turn back now. Control's story does an excellent job of leading the player through the twisted maze of the oldest house. It's possible for a player to go through the game just following the main quest and still walk away with an understanding of what happened. But there is, of course, the option for players to do a bit more exploring and find a vast wealth of background info available. There are office memos, classified documents, interpersonal communications, and so much more. All of these things provide a greater context to the main story, and to the world around it. For example, when coming upon an object of power, a possessed item, typically in the vicinity players can find documents explaining the history of the object, what it does, as well as many theories as to why it acts a certain way. Take for example a carousel horse that runs really fast, or an X-ray box that hypnotizes people. All of this information is available to the player, and there really isn't much need to hunt for it. The notes aren't really hidden, the game wants you to have them because they help expand the universe. Control's main story is a classic Hollywood script. It asks questions and then answers them in a satisfying fashion. So every mission, even if it feels like a detour from the main objective, actually works its way back into the plot and works to further push things along. Imagine a movie with no subplots or background characters. It would be boring as hell. That's why Control does a great job, and why I would consider it to be, by my definition, cinematic. I immediately fell in love with Control on my first playthrough. It's one of those games where you can really tell how much love and care went into creating it, and knowing that makes the experience altogether more enjoyable. The game looks amazing, and feels amazing to play, and you've got that all packaged with a one-of-a-kind story that captures your attention right from the start. That is why I love Control. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, be sure to subscribe and let me know in the comments what games you'd like to see me talk about in the future. Okay y'all, I'm headed back into the oldest house. catch you on the flip side.
I wish my leaves were as pretty as yours.